we're really thrilled to bring on to the show now the Attorney General of the beautiful and great state of West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey. So General Morrisey, really, really glad to have you on the show here with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Sir, what is your reaction to this news, which I think it is fair to describe as earth-shattering? It is fair to describe it as a crossing of the Rubicon. But before I put more words in your mouth, I'm curious what words you would use.
Look, I thought it was a terrible process, and it was so improper from the very beginning. When you go back to how this all started, it was so clear this was based upon terrible, improper political motives. They had to manufacture a lot of these connections to link the so-called falsified business records to an underlying crime. And that's really where I think this is going to fall apart as this goes up on appeal. This was a stretch at epic proportions, trying to take matters that normally people would consider to be misdemeanors and then try to put them into the election law context. I think this is a real despicable act going after the GOP nominee for president, and Americans are going to be outraged by it. I'm going to speak out loudly against it. And as people start to unpack this, I think there's going to be a lot available for turning this around and reversing it on appeal.
Well, I agree with you about appeal, very much so. I mean, the New York State Appellate Division is known as at least comparatively saner. I mean, comparatively fair and more sane than many of these trial court judges. Juan Merchan is probably even crazy as far as New York State trial court judges go. But I mean, what can we expect in terms of appeal when it comes to a timeline? I mean, I know that you're in West Virginia, not in New York State, but I think the question that many people are asking, reasonably so, is there any chance that the appellate division might be able to expedite this and actually overturn this prior to the election? Do you have any sense as to how that might go down?
Well, I think the one piece that we know, they announced that the sentencing is going to be on July 11th, I believe. And so we have a timeline. That's 3 days before the convention, just to put a political exclamation point on it. And then obviously every state is different in terms of the normal appellate process, but it's hard to see how all this is going to happen prior to the election. And so therefore, you're going to get all this political taint. And the only thing I would say is that the only political taint that should be going around is that of the improper political motives to bring this in the first place. And it's just a shame that we're at this place where people are going after the GOP nominee for president, I think based upon assumptions of election law violations, which I don't believe occurred. And so remember, they have to link two things together, the falsification of the business records and some underlying crime. And I just have never been able to see how they've been able to point to that as a federal election law violation.
Well, part of the reason, General Morrisey, that we haven't been able to pinpoint what the predicate offense was, the underlying crime, is that they literally never told us. I mean, like, at least I myself, I cover this daily for my podcast here on the First TV, America on Trial. I literally learned what the possible predicate offenses were, like the rest of the world did, with the jury instructions. I mean, many of us surmised that there was a federal campaign finance possibility. Then they threw in a tax law possibility as an additional unlawful means, and then additional bookkeeping as, I guess, the unlawful means to commit a different bookkeeping charge. I mean, the whole thing is just ridiculously, absurdly convoluted. But I want to ask you something slightly different, General Morrisey, because at the end of the last segment, what I was saying, which is a drum that I've been beating personally for a very long time now, Republicans, the right, we have to wake up and understand what is happening right now when it comes to lawfare. And I think many of us yearn for a neutral rule of law, a neutrally enforced. I mean, that's the way it should be, obviously. But blind justice, lady justice with the blindfold and all of that. But is there any appetite and is there any desire, you think, General Morrisey, from our side, whether it's AGs like yourself, whether it's DAs at a local or county level, to actually try to bloody up the partisan opposition a little bit, simply to try to get us back to a neutral place, back in the old status quo ante, the way it used to be?
Look, I think you're correct. We have to keep pressing to get back to a neutral place where everyone is treated the same way under the law. And obviously that didn't happen here. This was a gross violation of the rule of law. I mean, just in terms of how the whole trial went, you see that you can't treat people different from one another. And when you have someone who normally would be charged with a misdemeanor, if they could perhaps string that together, and they have to go to the lengths that they're doing. And you wouldn't do it to anyone else. You wouldn't do it to your neighbor. You wouldn't do it to literally anyone in America, but you do it to the president of the United States. That's wrong on every level. I think that's one of the reasons why this ultimately is going to get reversed. But on your specific point on lawfare, I agree it's a huge, huge problem. A lot of people that are commentators in this don't fully appreciate that a lot of the attorneys general lack the original criminal power to go after these. So certainly if there's a crime that should be prosecuted at the lower level, that should be done if you have evidence to do it. I still think that what we need to do is really sound out hard against this, get it reversed, and make sure that there are penalties if you're bringing these political persecutions. This should never be tolerated in any place across the United States of America. We should speak out against it. But a lot of the state AGs don't have that power. I think it's important to educate people about that.